The takeaway is you can change by feeling good. So by a technique I talk about called celebration, by feeling good, you can wire in habits. It doesn't have to be a process that you endure. It doesn't have to be habit formation. It doesn't have to be drudgery. It can be fun. It can be uplifting. It can be a discovery. And that's probably one of the most important ideas in my book is that you change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad.
You don't really know who you are or what you are until you put a really big challenge in front of you.
Fear is an asset and ally here to help you be magnificent.
This crazy, silly, stupid idea to run across the Sahara Desert.
You did make it this time, but you said if you didn't make it, you would try again and again.
Everybody's connected to nature, connected to music, to their families, and now we're going to build a world that doesn't have racism and war and starving kids.
I kept telling myself, run at it, and just keep smiling.
All right, BJ, we are rolling. Thank you very much again for making time to talk with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I love the fact that you're walking during this whole thing.
That brings a little different flavor to what we're talking about here. We like to get people active. So no reason that you have to be listening to a podcast sitting down. And I like you're walking in place right now as well for people who can't see you.
I typically have a stand-up desk, and what I'm doing right now, maybe I'll be stretching my calves and doing
a little balance workout. I like it.
Yeah, I like standing up when I work. That's the time.
Excellent. So I usually would start this by asking, where it is that you are walking or running right now, but are you in Stanford right now?
No, I'm in Maui. I'm in our Maui home. We've been here for about a year.
You're in Maui?
But thanks to COVID, yes, we just decided to stay here. So we are in Maui. I did surf this morning. I went surfing like I do every morning, and then I come back and work like crazy.
That's amazing. So I'm in New York City. You're in Maui. It's freezing cold where I am, and you are living it up in the sunshine in Maui. I love the way that the world can come together like this. So I'll probably have just recorded like a very brief intro before this that we'll share with people to let them know who you are and why I'm so excited to be chatting with you. But can you introduce yourself to the people who are walking and running along with us right now?
Yeah, I'm BJ Fogg. You can call me BJ. I've run a research lab at Stanford University for the last 20 years, and I teach one course there a year, a new course every year that I make up. And then outside of Stanford, I teach industry people how to create products that change behavior. And I have a foot in academics and a foot in industry. And my latest book is Tiny Habits, which brings together a lot of work that I'm sharing for the first time.
And you are like the guy. You are the best in the world on this subject and you're going to be humble about it, but you are the guy. Your lab at Stanford is called the Persuasive Technology. What's it called again?
It's called the Behavior Design Lab.
Behavior Design Lab.
For the first 10 years, I ran a lab called the Persuasive Technology Lab. For the last 9 to 10 years, it's been the Behavior Design Lab, which are different. People think it's the same thing. It's not. They're different things. And am I the guy?
You're the guy.
When it comes to habits, I have coached, the one fact, I don't know if anybody is the person, but when it comes to habits, I've coached over 40,000 people personally to create habits. And I started that in 2011 with the free 5-day Tiny Habits program that I do, which is personal coaching through email. So that's true. I've probably coached more than anybody in the world now. But does that mean I'm the expert on everything in behavior? No, there's other people out there that are more expert on like e-commerce and conversion funnels, and certainly in the domain of specific addictions, there are people that are way more expert than I am. And it's a big landscape, that's for sure.
So what are some of just to give people an idea, what are some of like the technologies that have come out of your design lab in Stanford, or the students that you've
Oh, well, I will say,
taught? What have they gone on to create?
okay, well, I'll say none has come out of my lab, but my students in my class, because that's not a lab's purpose. We do research.
Right.
But the students in my class, the most famous is somebody went on to co-found Instagram, and the idea of that actually started in my class. In the very same class was Tristan Harris, who started the Time Well Spent movement, and
Right.
has really championed a lot of that. Most recently through the movie Social Dilemma. There is a company called Gusto, Gusto, which is like a benefits company. Yeah, Josh was killing it. That's not on most people's radar. My former teaching assistant, Manu Kumar, has done some successful things, but he started his own venture fund, and I think he's on his third fund, and he is an amazing investor and mentor. And of course, some of my students have gone on to join bigger companies. They don't always do their own.
Right.
But all the way from, venture capitalists. Enrique Allen was both my student and my teaching assistant. He started the D Fund, which is a VC fund for designers and so on. So I like to think of my impact not as, all the Instagrams of the world or something like that, but it's helping students. And of course, I wasn't the only person. I mean, they picked various classes and mentors, but having some connection with students who have gone on to innovate and products that are touching, including I'll get detailed. When you type in a search into Google and it fills in the rest? Okay, now that's commonplace, but one of my students was on, the lead of that project. So products that touch billions of people. And also, I'm hoping I have positively influenced my students who become venture capitalists, so they invest in things that make people happier and healthier.
Well, you've certainly influenced me. I'm not up to the Instagram or the venture capitalist status yet, but I'm my background, which people listening to this might know, but you might not, is I'm a former lawyer that had an idea for this app, Charity Miles, and not really knowing anything, I started it, and through the years I've had to learn, and came across your work and just immersed myself in it and read your books and listened to every podcast you've been on, signed up for your Tiny Habits, every article I could find that you would write. And it's been hugely helpful and influential to me. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm just really excited to share tiny amount of your expertise with our community, especially now, it's the end of the year and people might be thinking about New Year's resolutions and the habits that they're looking to create next year. And nobody better to speak with about that than you. So to me, you're the guy.
Oh, you're very kind, and I'm flattered. Thank you.
So to maybe just to I know we want to talk about some of the new and exciting stuff that you've been thinking about, but just to kind of level set for some people who are new to this, you have a model, which is called the BJ Fogg Model, which kind of describes whether or not someone will take a particular action. And I thought that might be a helpful place to start to just get people on the common ground for the way you've been thinking about this for so long.
Good. I'll pick up on that. There is a really easy way to understand behavior, everybody. It's not as complicated as you think. 20 years ago, I thought it was complicated, even 15 years ago, but the pieces came together for me in 2007, and it goes like this. A behavior happens when there's motivation to do the behavior, there's ability to do the behavior, and there's a prompt. That's it. Motivation, ability, prompt. When those things come together at the same moment, the behavior happens. This could be a behavior you want to happen, like you meditate. It could be a behavior you don't want to happen, like you snack at 3 a.m. It could be a behavior that you do or don't want your employees to do. All behaviors are comprised of those 3 things: motivation, ability, prompt, coming together at the same moment.
And this is a little bit, so is it a descriptive model or a proscriptive model?
And I love that. And the words I use, I would be analysis and design. So I'm going to use those probably as synonyms. Analysis is yes, you can use the model to analyze and understand a behavior that's going on. So let's take my behavior this morning where I went surfing this morning, like I do every morning. Was I motivated? Yes. It's incredibly motivating to go out and get in the ocean and on the waves. Did I have the ability? Yeah, because I'm in Maui and I got up really early before any of my meetings. And was I prompted? Yes, because there's a moment of every morning, I get up probably too early to mention, but there's a moment where it's like, okay, I'm going to get ready, get my stuff together, my water, my coffee, my goggles, because I take goggles out surfing in case there's whales. So I was prompted. So that is an analysis. Now design, can you flip it over and say, hey, I really want to wash the windows in my Zoom room once a week. And I can say, okay, am I motivated? Yeah, a little bit. Do I have the ability? Not really. I don't have the tools around. So I would gather up the window washing tools, know exactly where they are. And then the only thing I'm lacking after that is a prompt. What's going to remind me to wash the windows? And I could say, well, maybe like every week I cut my fingernails. That's a weekly habit I have, cutting my fingernails. So maybe I make that my prompt. After I cut my fingernails, I'll go into my Zoom room and wash the windows. So in that case, I'm accounting for motivation. It doesn't have to be super high, but there has to be some. And motivation can be low if it's really easy to do. That's the tiny habits hack. There always has to be a prompt. Previously I called that trigger, and then I changed the name of that about 3 years ago to prompt.
Yeah,
so
I was going to ask you why you changed the name of that. When the difference between a trigger and a prompt.
Yeah, so the model I first published around it, I called it trigger, the thing that would cue or prompt you. And trigger has become a complicated word. And the meaning of, even in 10 years, the meaning shifted to become a lot more negative, like trigger warning and trigger alert and things like that. And so I've been debating this for a while, and I thought, no, let me just go to just a word that's less ambiguous, and I shifted to prompt.
Got it.
Same concept, new word, different word.
So if there's a certain behavior that one would like to do, and they're trying to get themselves to be able to do more, they want to, assuming that they want to do it, they have the motivation because they want to do it. So they need to make that action easy, and then they need to kind of put the right prompts in front of their face in the context for when they want to be able to do that action.
Yeah, that's one way you're accounting for all the components of the behavior model, which can be used to design habits. Habits are a special type of behavior. Habits are a subset of the larger category behavior.
Right.
And so tiny habits is just that. It's me using my behavior model to go, okay, pick habits that you want. So motivation, check. Make the habit really, really easy to do, like ridiculously easy. Tiny, meaning it doesn't take much time or effort, check. And then the last thing you need is a prompt. And in the tiny habits approach, you use an existing routine to be your prompt. You don't use post-it notes or alarms or other kinds of external reminders. And so that, like cutting my fingernails, can be the prompt or reminder to wash windows or something else. So you look for a routine or a habit, I'm using those as synonyms in this case, something you already do to serve as your reminder or your prompt for this habit that you want.
Cool. So I was actually going to ask the difference between a routine and a habit, and maybe come back to that, but let's put a pin in that one. Just to tie this back into that model where you said, motivation, ability, and prompt. From my reading of everything that you've done, the most important part of that is to make the ability part of that equation as easy as possible. So remove the barriers that would prevent you from doing it. Because you kind of assume that you have some motivation of doing it, but if you don't have the ability to do it.
Yeah, we could have a long discussion or debate about this. It's sort of like when you look at fire, you need fuel, you need oxygen, and you need a spark. And you say, well, which is the most important? Well, man, you need them all or you don't have fire.
Right.
But to your point, I think this is where you're going, which one often gets overlooked? And the thing that gets overlooked is ability. In other words, the simplicity, making it really, really easy to do. Because people think about motivation a lot, and people do know they need reminders. So those are things, but the thing that gets overlooked and the biggest opportunity has been understanding how do you make it really easy to do so the behavior is very reliably done and done quite automatically.
And so that automatically is actually the best transition back into that thing that I put a pin into, the difference between a routine and a habit. So what turns a behavior from a behavior into something that becomes a habit?
Yeah, well, let me first go with routine versus habit, and then we'll go to what creates habits. I did a video, you can still find it on Vimeo or somewhere, where I'm shaving as I'm explaining the word habit and routine and comparing the two.
Right.
And my point was habit, at least the way I use it in behavior design, is a behavior you do automatically or quite automatically without thinking, without deciding. It's something that you can go on autopilot and do it. And then I was saying a routine is a behavior you do frequently but not automatically. Like for me, at that point, shaving was not a habit. I would shave every day, but every day I would decide, when am I shaving? And am I going to shave with my electric razor or, the regular one? And so it was a frequent behavior, but not automatic. And I called that routine. I have changed my mind on, yes, those are two different things, but I don't think we should use the word routine. We need a new word. And so far, there is no word. There is no good, clear word for behavior we do on a regular basis, but not automatically. Yes, we could use the word routine, but the problem, this is why I changed my mind, is we're already using that word for other things. We need a special word. One of the problems in behavior change is our vocabulary is limited and messed up when it comes to behavior change, which makes it hard for people to really understand things conceptually. So what I've been looking around for and waiting for and asked people for, I still don't have the answer, is what's a word that we can use for these frequently done behaviors, but that are not automatic. We need a good word for that, and it needs to be different than any other word, so when we talk about it, it's clear what we're doing. So even though you can still find that shaving video, conceptually, I still think it's a good idea, but we are lacking the word for a frequently done behavior that's not automatic.
It's so interesting. I think about this all the time, and it's something that I mentioned to you. I've become friends with Nir Ayal, who I believe was a student of yours, and someone that you...
No, he came to my boot camp. He wasn't actually my student.
Okay.
Yeah, but he
In your
came to
boot
my
camp.
professional
But you
boot
guys
camp.
work in the same field. He also writes a lot about habits, and he says, I think he defines habit as something like a repeated behavior that you do with like little or no conscious thought. Something that you do automatically. And one of the things that I've spoken about with him is like whether running, for example, could ever be a habit. Like, I don't think that it's possible to do that with little or no conscious thought, or to do it automatically, unless you're being chased and it's like you're running, out of fight or flight. But like waking up in the morning at 6 a.m. or surfing, there's a lot of conscious thought that goes into waking up in the morning and getting your stuff around and walking out the door, and you're certainly putting some thought into that. I mean, it's not going to be automatic, likely.
The way I would think about something like running or surfing, and so what's difficult, and again, we don't have great language for this, it's actually a sequence of behaviors. Surfing isn't like, drinking coffee, which is just maybe the same thing. Maybe that's not. Taking a vitamin, very simple behavior. Whereas walking or surfing is a sequence of behaviors. And I have a framework and I have a way to write out these sequences, very limited in my book, Tiny Habits, because it was a little too geeky to put in a book like that. But the way I would think about it is, this morning, did I decide Did I deliberate whether I was going to go surfing or not? And the answer is no. I didn't go, do I go? Do I not go? Did I check the surf report? No, I didn't check it. I just got ready and went. So that I would consider a habit. I didn't deliberate. And the same thing with running. If you just decide, hey, am I running today or not? Well, then it's not a very strong habit. If you just, at this point, I just start dressing out, I get on my shoes and I go out the door, I don't even think about whether I'm going to do it yes or no, then I would consider that a habit, a strong habit. And a habit's a matter of degree. It's not really yes or no. It's stronger versus weaker versus, it's not a habit at all. It's a decision. And so I think you could look at, yes, a habit like surfing or running can involve a lot of steps, but was there a decision or a deliberation about whether you're going to do it or not? And if it was small, then maybe it's a weak habit or a moderate habit. And if there was no decision, like this morning, 0, whether I was going to surf or not, it was like, of course I'm going. And it's a very strong habit.
Well, the reason I ask is also just kind of the question whether or not the habit framework is the best framework for thinking about healthy behaviors, which for a lot of people requires a lot of thought, even when you really want to do them.
Well, it's a good question. And I think the fundamental problem is our language about human behavior and habits is messed up. We use things like reward and choice and habit. They're ambiguous words. They don't have, so for a technical vocabulary, you want a word to mean exactly one thing and only one thing. And that's not the vocabulary we have in behavior change. And it's created a lot of problems. Let me give an example of where I was trying to fix this and I totally got pushed back. So Kaiser Permanente wanted me to speak at a health conference for them. And I was like, sure, because I'm a fan of Kaiser. And they said, oh, the conference's name is Helping Our Members Make Healthy Choices. And I was like, you don't want healthy, so this is in the planning meetings. I was like, we don't want healthy choices, we want healthy habits. And they're like, wow. And healthy choices means they are deciding, am I going to eat a candy bar or am I going to eat, some, what I ate for breakfast is sauerkraut. I eat kimchi and sauerkraut combined. You don't want those decisions. You want them just to automatically eat the healthy food. If they're deciding, there's a chance they're going to eat a candy bar. So I made this argument, and they didn't buy it. They're like, no, we get it, but we're still going to call it healthy choices because we want everybody coming to the conference, all these professionals, to feel like we're not dictating, we are empowering, and people have choice. And I was like, yeah, but you want habits, and that means not choice. So my talk, I titled it, Helping Our Members Create Healthy Reflexes. So I went even further than habit, and I laid it out. I was like, no, we really want where people don't think about the healthy behavior they do it automatically, and to not do it would take effort. To not do the healthy thing would take effort. That's where we want to be. So, but you do hear healthy choices a lot. It sounds nice. It sounds liberal, but it goes back to.
That's great. How can an individual listening to this podcast create healthy reflexes in their life?
Yeah. Well, give me a domain. Give me an example, and I will give the designs.
So I'll give you a few from my life that I'm trying to work on personally. One, sleep. I'm trying to get more sleep, and I find, and this actually brings, I could tie in some other parts of this too, but I find myself, it's past my bedtime. I know I should be going to sleep, but maybe I just need to check one more email, or I'm scrolling on social media, or Netflix asks me if I want to watch one more episode. So, it kind of made me think the other night as I was getting prepared for this about your model. I'm like, well, I have the motivation because I really want to go to sleep. I have the ability, my bed's right there, and I've got the trigger because I know I should be going to bed. But then I also have all these other triggers coming at me. So what do you do when there's a multitude of triggers and abilities and motivations.
Well, the good news here is it's a design challenge, not a willpower challenge. So it's design. So if people listening to this are struggling with that or other kinds of habits, don't beat yourself up and think, oh, I don't have willpower or motivation. Position it as a design challenge. Let me give an example of what I do in sleep, and then we'll go back, Gene, to what you said. Because the example I'll give will be tidier, I think.
Okay.
I'm not a great sleeper, and I've worked for years. I think it's genetic, but I've worked to optimize my sleep, done tons of things, blackout shades, blue glasses, et cetera, et cetera. But still, there's often I'll wake up at 2:30 or 3, and I'll be restless, and I'll get up, want to read, or here in Maui, I'll want to go outside and look at the stars and just stuff. I just feel like, oh, I need to get up. And what I figured out, and this is part of the design, you have to know what is the behavior I'm going to design into my life. And what I figured out is, and the tiny habit recipe goes like this. After I feel like I want to get up in the middle of the night, I will lay back down in bed for 15 seconds and go from there. Now what happens is now I know what the behavior is. So this is where I'm going with your example or any other. You've got to know what the behavior is. And for me, I figured out that laying back down in bed for 15 seconds, that's what I design into my life. Now, if I still want to get up, I can. But I would say 80%, maybe well over 80% of the time, when I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I want to get up. No, lay back down, BJ, for 15 seconds. I lay back down and it's like, oh my gosh, this feels so good. I was crazy. I really don't want to get up. So knowing, number one, know what the behavior is, and then know where it fits in your life. Now, it doesn't fit when I'm laying down on the pillow saying I want to get up. I find I need to be sitting on the edge of the bed, almost ready to get up. And then now it's just a habit. I'm just like, okay, lay down. And then if you still want to get up, you can. But so that for me keeps me in bed. And then I usually do get back to sleep. So all the stuff I had about like, oh, I'm having crazy dreams, or I need to get up, I need to refresh, I need to go outside, all that leaves usually. So for the case of going to bed, know what the behavior is. And what I've heard from lots of people, it's brushing their teeth. So, because that is the beginning of the going to the bed routine. So Gene, if you find that for you is like, okay, brushing my teeth signals that I'm going to then go to bed. At what moment do you design brushing your teeth into your nightly routine? And now you might have to play a trick on yourself, because your brain will go, well, gosh, if I brush my teeth, that means I have to go to bed. Therefore, I'm going to forget to brush my teeth, or I'm not going to do it, right? That will happen. So the trick you play is like, hey, I can brush my teeth and stay up if I want. Just like I can lay down for 15 seconds and still get up if I want. So I don't reject the habit. So that's what I would try, is find the right behavior, find what it comes after in your nightly routine, and don't make it so rigid that you sabotage the habit. Because part of your brain wants to stay up and be stimulated and watch Netflix, talk to people, do interesting things. And so yeah.
So the tiny habit recipe, just because I heard it in there and I wanted to bring it out, is kind of deciding on the behavior that you want, and then anchoring that to some other behavior that you're going to do. So after I do X, I'm going to do Y.
Yes.
Is that the recipe? Did I get that right?
Yes, exactly right. So, and notice you're designing it in. You're looking at what are all the things I do. What does it come after? That's part of the design challenge. And you might have the right habit, and it might be tiny enough, and it may not be working. So you have to just say, well, where does this fit? Let me give another quick example of a habit of mine that is breaking. About 2 weeks ago, my partner and I decided we weren't going to eat breakfast anymore. And we were going to, do 16-hour fasts from 7 at night to 11 in the morning. And so we tried it for a couple days, and it's like, wow, this is great. I feel better. I'm not hungry. Let's keep going. So we kept going. But what that caused is my other habits that were anchored to breakfast like filling a cup with vitamins, I have to find a new spot for that. Okay, because I changed that, and that was the anchor for other habits. And by the way, that 16-hour fasting isn't as hard as I thought. It's actually pretty easy.
I actually just started doing that as well. The 16-hour fast is not hard.
Yeah, and I feel better. But now I have to, there's a few habits that I have to redesign back into my new set of routines that I do.
And just so that I'm making sure that I'm understanding this as well, is the behavior that you're designing isn't necessarily the behavior that you want. So like, even though the behavior that I want is sleep, the action that I'm going to do is going to be something much easier and smaller than actually falling asleep. So it might just be like lying down for 15, after I brush my teeth, I'm going to lie down for 15 seconds. And if I fall asleep, I fall asleep. And if not, I don't. But is that what you're saying, or am I misunderstanding that?
Well, it's a great question, and I would say you have half of it, and you have the more complicated half. So yes, habits that we do can be a means to an end that we want, like sleep or weight loss or more energy or better nutrition. Like taking vitamins, nobody wakes up and says, I want to take vitamins. You take vitamins as a means to an end. But the other half is there are some habits that in and of themselves are what we want. For example, my partner and I have the evening habit of going down and swimming in the ocean every day. That in and of itself, we're not really doing it for exercise. We're just doing it because we love doing it. So we've made it into a habit. So that in and of itself, it's its own thing. It's not a means to an end. So it could be either one. Sure.
Got it. Let's take an example on the other end of that spectrum, waking up in the morning early. So another thing that can sometimes be hard is after I've stayed up and not gotten enough sleep, or not gone to bed at a reasonable hour, I try to wake up early in the morning and run. And especially when it's really cold here in New York, the motivation end of that motivation ability prompt, I got the prompt, the alarm goes off, but that motivation, sometimes I just roll back over and go to sleep. How would you address that side of the equation?
Well, I'll give you my personal view, okay? So we get up at about 4 a.m. Not to any alarm. It's just that we go to bed like 8, and so 4 is like, and we've come to really just love the mornings and the stars and sitting outside and all that. So my personal view is, I know some people may not like this. Don't force yourself to get up early if you don't want to. If that doesn't work for you, find another time to run. There's no virtue in the fact that I get up at 4 a.m. That you might even consider a vice, because there's sometimes it's like 3, and then my partner's also awake. It's like, oh, should we get up? No, we can't get up. Oh, we should get up. It's not. Okay, so first of all, the whole idea that you have to get up early to be a good person, reject that. And if you happen, if somebody gets up early, don't admire them on that basis. There's no reason to admire that I get up at 4 or whatever, because it just happens. Now, if you do need to, and my view has been for years and years, is I love the fact that I don't have to set an alarm. Unless I'm traveling, then I do. Other than that, I never set alarms. So I have this one of the luxuries in life is I never want to be awoken from sleep by an alarm unless I have to. But let's get back to your question. Yes, go to bed earlier. I think, so to help you get up early enough to run, let's say that's the only time you can. You have to wake up and run in the morning. You're not going to make it. There's no other way. Right. Then work on your evening wind down habit. So the answer to that, and I've coached lots of people who have done it this way, is to just start your bedtime ritual sooner and start sleeping sooner. So it's easier to get up when the alarm goes off. And what I would suggest, and I haven't studied this part systematically or scientifically, but my personal suggestion would be make a policy to never hit snooze. No snooze, ever, ever, ever. Get an alarm clock that does not have snooze. Do not make it your phone. Your phone is designed, the snooze button is bigger than the stop button. Apple, what? You're designing to get people to snooze, which is bad. I think every time you hit the snooze button, you siphon off some of your willpower, your energy, your mojo for the day. And if you do it over and over, you're setting yourself at a disadvantage for the day. So start your night routine earlier, get a real alarm clock, not your phone, and make it a policy to never hit snooze. Just get up. Now, some people with tiny habits, they found that what they'll do is just get up for a handful of seconds, and if they feel like going to bed, they do. So kind of the opposite of my nighttime. Other people put one foot on the floor. Other people raise their arms. So there's people done these little tiny versions of getting up. And I think that's okay, but I think, change your sleep schedule and just don't think of go post snooze, become a post snooze button person. That's my prediction, what will help.
I like that. That's very actionable. And then let's come back to the thing, because I kind of interrupted what you were going to say about it. But how do you, with all this in mind, those are some great examples, how do you create healthy reflexes?
I think all reflexes are easy. So make it as easy as possible. There are 3 ways to make something really easy. One is you skill up. You get more skilled at something. So let's say that you want to have that you'll always wipe the kitchen counter. Like just as a reflex, you walk in and wipe the counter. Well, make sure you know how to do that. Make sure the tools are there. And don't make it too big a job. So skill up, make sure you have the tools and resources, and scale it back. Because if you think you have to wipe all the kitchen counters, there's going to be this moment where your brain goes, no, I don't want to do that. If it's just one simple thing, like wipe one counter, then that you don't get that kind of reactance as much. So I would focus on making it really, really easy, and then design the habit in. So I think of a reflex as an extreme version of a habit. It's something you just go on autopilot, and to stop it would take effort. How do you go from a habit to a reflex? I've never mapped that out. So you're asking me a question that I'm just going to take this answer. I may have a different answer in the future. It's just a matter of degree. It is just so automatic. Like right now, wearing a mask,
right?
Many of us, that was not automatic. And then now, I get to my front door, I reach for the mask. Okay, right. Here's one of mine. Boom, smiley face mask. Okay. Now, one of these days, I predict, once we don't have to wear masks, we're going to get to the door.
We're still going to do it.
We're still going to put the mask on, or our brain's going to go, where's the mask? Where's your mask? Okay, that's going to be like, it became so wired in that it became a reflex. It became something that even when not needed, you're still doing it. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Great point. So that actually brings me to, I mentioned, I was texting with Nirayal, a couple of days ago. I said, what would be something really great to ask BJ Fogg? And so we've kind of circled around this a couple times, but the question that he came up with that I thought was really great is, what is one area of habits that you think needs more research? We kind of talked. We need some new words. We need some new things there we've talked about. But what's an area that you think needs more research, or that you would like someone to look into more, or that you would want to look into more?
Well, in general, all aspects of habits. I mean, the same old stuff gets trotted out over and over, and people think, oh, it's been solved. It has not been solved. That's stuff from decades ago, and much of it doesn't work. So just because there have been some books and bloggers and a lot of attention around habits, don't assume that the science or the understanding of habits is very rich. It's actually not. So, but if I had to pick one area, it would be helping people stop habits, especially addictions. That's complicated. And yes, we have AA and we have a handful of other approaches, but we need a lot more. It's not going to be a one size fits all, just like there's no one car for everybody, or there's no one city that everybody should live in. We need a lot of innovation and a lot more products and solutions to help people get rid of the behaviors that are unhealthy or not helping them. It's just, and I'm probably never going to go that direction. I mean, in terms of creating habits, all habits form in the same way. They start tiny, they find where they naturally fit, and they get nourished. All habits, good ones and bad ones. But the way that you stop habits, I talk about it as untangling bad habits, is different. It's not the same for all habits. It's the person, it's the habit they're doing, and their context. So those three variables you got to account for, and it's the interaction among the variables. Compared to creating habits, stopping habits, or what people say breaking, I don't like that word, but breaking habits, it's much harder, and we need innovation and we need programs in that space. So thank you, Nir, for asking the question. I think you'll probably agree with me on the answer. Is just, that's an area where do not think we've solved this problem, and there's a ton of innovation to be done. And bam, I invite people to dive in and pick a specific type of habit that people want to stop, whether it's biting nails or drinking too much or gambling online. Pick something specific and become the world's expert at helping somebody get rid of that behavior. You will have so many people, I mean, even something as simple as skin picking or biting nails. Pick one. You're going to have tens of thousands of people right away. I mean, if that got publicized, you're going to have people that want your help.
Interesting. Actually, interestingly enough, I think Nir is very interested in that because he just wrote that book, Indistractable.
Yeah.
Which is to some extent about, not necessarily breaking bad habits or stopping bad habits, but helping us not be as distracted by the kind of reflexes that we might otherwise have towards some habits that are less than healthy.
Yeah, really important. And so, I mean, we've compiled in my Stanford, it was a class and then became a lab project, over 150 different ways to have a healthier relationship with your screen. I mean, mostly it's like reduce screen time, but some screen time's, fine.
Right.
And so there are a bunch of ways of doing it. We created a little wizard that asks you questions. So if people are working on screen time, hone in on what is not serving you. And there are ways to take control of that. And some of those things have become reflexes. Like Nir and others talk about, I'm bored. What do you do when you're bored? You pull out your phone. I mean, that's definitely become a reflex for some people. But you can get rid of that.
You have that list somewhere that maybe we could link to and people might look that up?
The way to get it's at screentime.stanford.edu. So screentime.stanford.edu. The list on the back end is not shared. I mean, that's our secret sauce. But what you can use is the cute little genie. She'll ask you some questions, and then she'll match you with the best solutions for
cool.
you. Yeah.
I think people would definitely like that. I'm going to check that out. Screentime.stanford.edu. Excellent. So tiny habits. I think that people I think that's going to resonate with people as we're making our New Year's resolutions, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. Is there any kind of final words of wisdom or calls to action that you'd like to share with people today?
Yeah, I guess you've had great questions and we don't have time for everything, but one thing I want to put out there is people need to understand it's emotions that create habits, not repetition. And I discuss this in my book and in part elsewhere. So,
emotions create habits, not repetition.
It's not repetition. Look up the research that people cite when they say repetition. It does not support that. And in fact, I'll give you the research to look up. It's Lally, Lally 2009. That's what most people cite. It does not show a causal effect on repetition. It shows correlation. Correlation is not causality. What does create them is emotions. So the takeaway is you can change by feeling good. So by a technique I talk about called celebration, by feeling good, you can wire in habits. It doesn't have to be a process that you endure. It doesn't have to be, habit formation doesn't have to be drudgery. It can be fun. It can be uplifting. It can be a discovery. And that's probably one of the most important ideas in my book, is that you change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. And there are a variety of ways that that applies, but it applies to how the habit wires in, and you rewire your brain through positive emotions. You're self-reinforcing.
I could see how that would work, for surfing in Maui this morning. How does that work for wiping down the counter, or flossing one tooth, as an example I've heard you use, or eating one piece of broccoli?
Yes, I will give a celebration for the first two. Wiping down the counter. As you wipe down the counter, one way is look at the counter and think, oh my gosh, this is so much cleaner. Or if the germs matter, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm helping take care of germs, and I'm succeeding in protecting my children from these germs. So you purposefully cause yourself to feel successful. In the case of flossing, it's a little bit different. You can floss one tooth and then smile at yourself in the mirror and go, good for me. Like you self-reinforce. Anything that makes you feel a positive emotion. The first one, what you're doing is more aligned with the habit. You're looking at the results of the habit, and you're making that prominent in your mind. And the second one, you could say the smile is that, but just smiling at yourself and giving yourself a positive sign will lift your mood, and that will be a signal to your brain that that is something that you will repeat, or will want to repeat more in the future. And it's not just wanting, it becomes more automatic because of the dopamine release and the way the neurons, the myelination of the neurons. So it's emotions that cause the release of dopamine and the myelination. So that's one function of emotions.
I am glad that I asked that question, because that's obviously a very important part of the tiny habit recipe there.
Yeah, and then for something like surfing, it's sort of built in, because there's this moment when you've caught the wave. There's this slip feel. Bam! And that's the thing that you succeeded, right? The same thing. You have an emotion of success. And you want that over and over.
And you get that with running too, or even going for a walk. Like, it might take a little bit of effort just to get up and take those first couple steps, but once you get that groove, it's like, okay. I'm glad I did wake up early this morning and get out here. And the sun, where I run I'm right by the East River. The sun comes up, and even though it might be a struggle to get those first steps out of the bed, I'm always glad when I do it.
Yeah, exactly. And a current research project in my Stanford lab is we're looking at what are all the different ways you can up-regulate a positive emotion. So you're feeling something positive. How do you turn up the volume on that? And our next lab meeting, we have a weekly meeting. The next one's tomorrow. So more and more, hopefully, we'll understand of how do you, as you're running and you're feeling good about that, how do you feel even better? And what you just said, look over the river, appreciate the moment. Those are all upregulation techniques.
Get a good playlist of music going.
There we go.
Start feeling the Bruce Springsteen. Maybe sing along.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, again, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us. I know that the people walking and running with us right now are going to take a lot from this. And whether you're listening to this for New Year's resolutions or sometime in the future, there's no time that you can't start your own tiny habits. So, BJ, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone out there for walking and running along with us. Every mile matters.